Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy!
All right. So where are we at today?
Today, we're going to head to a place that gets more snow than the Swiss Alps.
Canada.
Its coast is home to over 600 species of fish.
I don't know.
It's the home of the Great Barrier Reef.
I know I should know this, but I
You
want to
should.
say Australia, but do they get that much snow?
Yeah, evidently. That's why I thought it was an interesting fact.
Really? I didn't think they got that snow.
Evidently, they do.
Interesting.
But the majority of people live on the coast because it's nice and warm. I mean, well, not nice and warm, but it's the coast stuff. But I thought that was wild information for Australia because, I only think of Australia as hot, but evidently it does get snow.
Interesting.
Yep. So we're going to go to Australia in 1935. We're going to start mid-April when Bert Hobson and his son Ron are out to sea fishing near Sydney. Now Bert casts his line, and it's not too long before he gets a bite and realizes he's got a small shark at the end. And since they just kind of started fishing, he's not in a real hurry to pull it in. And then he sees the line kind of go out a little bit, and it's just acting weird. So he's like, okay, I'm just going to reel this bad boy in. And then he realizes the small shark that he had on the line is practically disappeared because it had been eaten by an 11 to 15 foot tiger shark that has now tangled himself in the line.
Is a shark your murderer? Because I feel like that's cheating.
No. The shark is part of the story, but he is not the murderer.
All right.
Now, Bert's brother owns an aquarium.
Is his brother's name Ernie?
No. So Bert figures that if he can manage to get this sucker back, it can go in one of his brother's exhibits. And that's exactly what he does. He manages to take this tangled shark back to the shore, and they get it into his brother's aquarium.
Jeez. You said it was 11 feet?
Well, so I had... there's several different articles. Some will say it's a 15-foot tiger shark. Some will say 11. So that's why I said 11 to 15, because apparently, depending on the penis measurer you're using, the scale is different. But
all right,
I said 11 to 15 because I don't know. A big ass shark,
like a Kardashian ass.
I didn't realize people were measuring those.
You said big ass.
Oh, you've got problems. Anyhow, the shark is on display in the aquarium a few days, and I don't know if you've ever had something wild and tried to capture it, but tends to not, they don't thrive.
Do children count?
They weren't in the wild and you didn't pluck them up. As far as I know, you squirted those suckers out.
It's disgusting.
All natural. You didn't select them from a wood line. But generally, things that were in the wild and then put into captivity, they don't necessarily thrive because they go from a big wide open world like the ocean and then into a tiny little tank. So them suffering from depression and being upset isn't abnormal. But they throw the shark in the tank. It's not happy. It refuses to eat. It swims back and forth constantly because it's stressed. I mean, people still come to see it because it's a giant or it's a big tiger shark. But a week goes by. The shark starts going real crazy, thrashing around. There's a good group of people watching it because that's what people do. It's like watching a car crash.
Or going to the zoo.
Well, then the shark barfs up everything that's in his stomach and out pops a human arm.
Oh, see, that's what it is. That's why he's not eating. He had his preferences. They just weren't feeding him right.
Well, and no one's missing an arm in the aquarium, so it's alarming.
Yeah, I feel like somebody can't just forget that.
Yeah. I imagine if they were missing an arm in the aquarium, it wouldn't go unnoticed. So
I would hope not.
Officials come in to take a peek at this arm. Shark experts would toss out information that typically flesh is digested within 36 hours. And mind you, that shark has been in the tank for a week. So it's a real head scratcher. But then the shark experts are all, well, maybe with all the stress, it slowed down the digestion of the shark because he was upset.
Or did somebody chuck a person in there to dispose of them?
Well, that's also a theory eventually. Because the arm wasn't very badly broken down, it looked pretty good. And fortunately, it had a tattoo on the forearm that could still be seen pretty clearly of two boxers, like...
Were they boxers, like boxer briefs, or were they boxers as in flying fists, or boxers as in the furry kind?
Two dudes about to start in a fight.
Gotcha.
So, in addition to that tattoo, another thing other than a shark regurgitating an arm pops up is that there's a rope tied around the wrist of this random arm. So that's also a little weird. So the police are sifting through missing person files and post a description of the tattoo in the paper. A man would see the description and head to the police station believing it to be his brother, 45-year-old James Smith, also known as Jimmy. Now, he used to be a lightweight boxer some 20 years ago, and had moved on from that to owning his own billiard saloon. I mean, he made a nice life for himself, his wife, and his 18-year-old son, and he happened to be missing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, prior to Jimmy being reported missing, Miss Smith had waited 2 weeks before letting authorities know that her husband hadn't come home.
She's part of it.
Now, she would head down to the police station to identify that it was her husband's arm, and then they would also confirm his fingerprints just to be doubly sure that's whose arm it was. And I can just say, I can't imagine having to go identify anybody by their arm.
Especially after it's been, I guess, waterlogged. Does it count as waterlogged if it was inside of a shark?
But I don't know what it would look like. I would assume it's a piece of your person. But it did make me think of that case that I did where the McDonald's shooting.
Oh, yeah.
Of where they did Polaroids of like, I can't imagine identifying a body or pieces of a body.
It's sad.
Like, does this mole look like it could be your husband's? Anyway, now up until the point that they get a positive confirmation of Jimmy being the owner of the arm, the police were of the mind that the person committed suicide.
What?
Because that apparently was happening around those parts.
Who ties rope around their wrists?
People would tie weights to themselves and chunk themselves off the bridge into the sea.
Okay.
But when they found out who the person was and heard from his brother that he wouldn't have killed himself. He loved his wife, he loved his son, he had worked too hard to build the life that he had, and he definitely wasn't punching a ticket early when he had so much to live for. Now, mind you, we're in Australia in 1935, and I know how you like my little historical tidbits, but Australia suffered an economic depression starting in 1932 that it would take them a decade to dig out of. So, since we're in that time chunk, hundreds of thousands of people would be out of work. Kids would be hungry. The menfolk wouldn't have work. And so they'd be left humiliated and powerless, while the women were doing the best to keep their family together. So in a time frame of that, you've got somebody who owns their own business, isn't doing poorly. So that's why they're like, he wouldn't have killed himself. Now, where people were committing suicide because they were in the depths of despair and had no way out, that's who I was just like, okay. Because initially I did the same thing of like, what? Who does that?
Nice.
But I can just say, I wouldn't tie myself to some weights and chunk my ass into the water.
Mm-mm.
That seems like the worst way to go.
I would go the whole car route, like the pipe.
Excuse me?
And the carbon monoxide. Because I feel like you just go night-night.
Oh, it's like, I'm going to need more words. You're walking into traffic.
Well, I haven't thoroughly thought this through before. You're making me think about it on the fly.
Well, when I read that the police, when there was a rope tied around his wrist, that they thought suicide, I was like, what? But there were also some officers who were thinking that maybe Jimmy lost his arm in a shark attack and was still alive somewhere. Because, I mean, you don't know.
I feel like you do know.
Now, during all this investigating and speculating as what happened to Jimmy, the tiger shark would go belly up in his tank. They'd fish him out, cut him open to see if there's any more Jimmy in there, but there wasn't. And before you think, well, actually, you already threw it out there that Jimmy's wife had something to do with it, and that's why she didn't report him missing for a while. So Jimmy was headed out on a fishing trip with his buddies, and he wasn't going to be back for a while. Now, he didn't really say when he'd be back, and he had gone on trips before with the guys and had been gone a while. That was part of the reason why she didn't know how long he'd be gone or when he'd be back, so that's why she didn't report him as missing, because he had done this before.
That wouldn't fly with me. I'm just saying.
I did the same thing of just like, I guess it is the 30s, so it's a different mindset, but
Yeah.
I would at least want to know where you're going to be. And not as like I don't trust what you're doing, but like,
No, but you want to know.
how do I know if anything happens?
Yeah.
I don't know where you are or how to reach you, whether it's something that happens to me, our child, the house, anything. I have no earthly idea where you are. I just have to sit here and wait.
Yeah.
But so he would tell his wife he's going on a trip with a friend. He'll be back in a few days.
It wasn't a very good friend.
Well, him and his friend would play cards at a hotel before officially starting their fishing trip. Now, that would be confirmed by people in the hotel who saw Jimmy. Right before she reported him missing, she gets a weird phone call from somebody who doesn't identify themselves to their home that tells her not to worry, Jimmy will be home on Monday. And then they just hang up, which she thought was super weird, but then it's one of those, I guess if they're doing their manly thing, maybe doing some drinking, maybe that's why it's like somebody called the wife, which is still weird, but that was the only thing that was strange about Jimmy being gone, other than it was a little longer than usual, but it wasn't abnormal for him to just head out.
All right.
So that's as much as they get from the wife. So now they're going to try to see what they can shake out from the time he started his trip to what occurred and how he came to be without an arm.
And where's the rest of him? So they're going to track down the friend, I'm assuming. Did the wife know who he went with? Or was it just like a mystery friend?
I don't think she was given many details other than he was going with a friend, or that he was just going on a fishing trip. I think she might have just assumed you're not going fishing by yourself. But it's just like, but he had a habit of going out with people on fishing trips or whatever.
Okay.
So they check with a previous employer who happened to be a boat builder, but they couldn't help him determine his last couple days. Then they track down the rental cottage on the coast that him and his friend were staying at, 42-year-old Patrick Brady. Now, they check out the cottage first and don't find any blood evidence or anything, and nothing that seems crazy. Now, they go to talk to Patrick, and he happens to be picked up for forging checks when they decide to chit-chat with him about anything he knows about how Jimmy's arm came into be missing from him, and where's Jimmy. Now, Patrick would deny knowing anything about how Jimmy's arm ended up being barfed up in a tank in an aquarium. So the investigators go back to the cottage people. Mm-hmm. And then that's when they're told they're missing a mattress and a trunk that are normally in the cottage. And I'm not 100% how you don't initially notice a missing mattress out of a place, but I don't know what's going on in the 30s in Australia, but I would feel like that would be an obvious, this bed is without a mattress.
It sounds like something shady went down. Who steals a mattress?
Right.
Talk about a gross thing to steal. That means it's covered in blood. Got it?
Right. I could see not noticing a missing trunk, but the mattress seemed a little weird unless somebody remade a box spring.
I feel like you're still going to see that it's way lower than it should be.
Right.
And aren't they changing the sheets?
So that's why I assumed they made up the box spring or did something so it wasn't initially noticeable that it came back as like oh yeah, we're missing a mattress and a trunk.
I feel like the second you pull the sheets off the box spring, you're going to see that that's not the mattress.
But so then they go back to talking to Patrick, and he's still not real interested in talking. So they're like, you know what, we're going to talk to Patrick's wife and see if she knows anything. But she doesn't know anything because apparently in the 30s, the husbands don't really tell their wives anything. So then Patrick suddenly wants to talk to the officers. And I mean, mind you, at this point, they're thinking that Patrick definitely did it, chopped him up on the mattress, then stuffed him in a trunk, tossed him into the sea. And maybe his arm wouldn't fit, so he strapped it to the side of the trunk and then chunked him over, and that's why there's only an arm.
Or maybe the trunk opened?
Mm-hmm. So Patrick ends up squealing on one of his cohorts in his check forging ring, Reginald Holmes. Now, Reginald Holmes actually is the one who owned that boat building business that had previously employed Jimmy. So this feller Reggie has a ton of speedboats that he used for smuggling and insurance scams, and Jimmy would be a part of those insurance scams. Now, Reggie, Patrick, and Jimmy would use the signatures that Reggie would get when people would buy boats from him. Then he would use those signatures that he's forging checks, and Patrick and Jimmy would cash them in. Now, they would also swindle tools and supplies from contractors, and just really had a set of sticky fingers. So the amount of money they're making is definitely not completely legitimate. I get they're selling he's selling boats, but it's just like, they're not the best crowd.
Mm-mm.
So Jimmy and Reggie would have a dispute over one of the fraud check scams that they had going, and Jimmy would start blackmailing him. Now, one of the boats Reggie owned was a pleasure boat called the Pathfinder. From what I get, it's a decent-sized yacht. When I first read that Reggie had a pleasure boat, I was not thinking
Yeah. I pictured a dude on the boat just jerking his junk.
I kind of just assumed it was a boat that was like a brothel boat, but evidently it was a boat for pleasure of riding around and like a
Right. It's not a speedboat. It's not it's just a chilling.
right.
Yeah.
It's a yacht, a pleasure boat rather than a speedboat. But I was like, what does that say about my brain hole?
That's all right.
I automatically went to prostitution boats.
That's all right. I wanted to ask you if the boat's name was Jizz, but I thought you were going to call me stupid.
No. Yeah, well, I think we're both sick for a real long time.
It's our mom's fault.
Now, Reggie would destroy that boat to get the insurance money.
Oh, that's messed up.
But Jimmy would go to the police and let them know that they needed to look into it because it may or may not have been an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Reggie wouldn't get any insurance money and would just be down a yacht. That's when Jimmy would become a police informant. Mind you, he's doing that while he's still blackmailing Reggie over the forged check scam.
Sounds like a good feller.
Definitely weaving some things, and I guess it's just like there's no honor among thieves kind of thing. So the investigators are finding that wildly interesting, that now you have people who are doing some shady things, and let's go talk to Reggie. So they head over to talk to Reggie, and Reggie's like, I don't even know who Patrick is, and I don't even know what you're talking about. So they're like, okay, whatever. So a couple days go by. There's a speedboat that gets pulled over after a 4-hour-long water chase involving 2 police boats in the Sydney harbor. After the boat had nearly hit another boater, it was reported that it was like driving all erratically. That's what made them go pursue the boat. But after the end of that 4-hour chase, it ended up being Reggie behind the wheel, who was drunk and had a superficial gunshot wound to his head by a .32 caliber pistol.
Oh.
Now, weirdly, this feller had such a hard head that the bullet crumpled on his forehead, stunned him, and he toppled into the water, it snapped him out of his little daze, and he'd climb back into the boat and attempt to make it back to shore when he's like driving all over the place. I imagine blood, all the things make it hard to drive your boat straight. And then when the police try to pull him over, he's freaking out thinking that whoever just tried to kill him is coming back.
Don't they have like lights on the boats though?
So I feel like he's an idiot.
He also got shot, so.
Yeah, so he doesn't know what just fucking happened, and now he's being pursued. So that's why it's a 4-hour chase, because he's worried he's going to be finished off. But that's what the story he'll tell police officers once they apprehend him, and that he was just fearing that he was going to be killed. Now, the officers are less than amused by his drunken tale and felt like the gunshot wound was self-inflicted and that this was this man's poor attempt at suicide. And I did do a whole, what the fuck is with Australia right now? Were people just dropping by like flies and they're like, another suicide?
Or is it kind of like in the U.S. how the police were quick to, it was suicide. She hung herself with her wrists tied behind her back. Yeah, it was suicide.
She shot herself 4 times in the head. Suicide. It was a hair trigger.
Right.
Suicide.
Right. So I kind of question, being tossed over the side, I wonder. Yeah. It's all suicide.
So the officers don't believe him, is what the main point of that is. So then, a little while later, we're now in early June, Reggie decides he wants to cooperate with the police investigation in regards to Patrick. Mainly, I think, a gunshot wound to your forehead, it can be a motivator.
A little bit.
So he goes to the police to let them know he wants to cooperate with their investigation. He tells them that Patrick had come to his home and confessed on the night that he killed Jimmy, even brought with him Jimmy's severed arm as proof that Jimmy was dead. He then told him that he put the rest of his body in a trunk and tossed him in the Gunnamatta Bay off of a bridge. And apparently that was also super common in Australia this time. So common that when you toss things off the bridge, I assume we're not talking always body parts, but it became known as the Sydney send-off. Like, all right.
I was trying not to laugh because you're talking about bodies.
Well, I don't...
They're getting chunked off
No.
so frequently.
No. That's why I said I assume it's not just with body parts, but if the act of going to this bridge and chunking something off of it was referred to as the Sydney send-off. I'm just hoping and assuming we're not exclusively talking about getting rid of bodies. But anyway, so that's what he says. Patrick came to his house with this arm, says that's what he did with Jimmy. Then Patrick demanded Reggie pay him £500 or he's going to be next. And considering, again, it's in the throes of a depression in the 30s, that's a lot of money, even for somebody who's not making it in a legal way.
Mm-hmm.
But Reggie pays it. Patrick then left the arm at Reggie's house as, like, I guess a reminder. So Reggie drove to the coast in a panic and chunks the arm into the surf. And, like, with all that, he was scared. And he was pretty sure that since somebody also tried to shoot him in the head, that they're going to try to do it again since he's still alive. And with all the things that he knows, that he's willing to cooperate. But investigators tell him that the only way they're willing to not charge him with accessory to murder is if he testifies against Patrick. And Reggie agrees. A few days later, June 11th rolls around. Reggie would withdraw £500, tell his wife he had to go meet someone real fast, and he leaves home. And they really should have believed his original story of that somebody tried to kill him on the boat rather than hawking it up to a drunken man trying to commit suicide and having regrets, because he would be found in his car under Sydney Bridge the following morning with 3 gunshot wounds to his chest from a .32 revolver. And if you don't recall, that was the caliber that crumpled on this man's forehead.
Did they say it was suicide again?
I will tell you that it was disturbing because initially they did think it was a suicide. And then, so the only thing I can figure is whoever got there first, you couldn't tell he was shot 3 times. They just assumed somebody's dead in their car under a bridge, that they drove under there and committed suicide because apparently that's what everybody was doing during the Depression. But I think once they realized he was shot 3 times in the chest, it was like so not really a suicide.
We're actually going to have to do some work.
But it's just funny your head went there, because when I read that they initially thought suicide, I was like, the fuck?
It was a successful suicide attempt this time.
But there were no witnesses because the bridge that he was under was a train that goes by. So no one heard any gunshots and no one saw anything. So they have nothing to go on. But now their only person to testify for Patrick's trial is now dead. And then you figure Jimmy, he's already assumed dead. So on to Patrick's murder trial for Jimmy. So I don't know if you've noticed up till yet, there's a whole lot of nothing. There's no body, there's no mattress, there's no trunk. Just a barfed up arm and a now dead feller under a bridge that claims Patrick confessed to him. And when Reggie was killed, Patrick couldn't have been involved since he was already in jail for the potential murder of Jimmy. But the bigger problem was that they actually had to prove Jimmy was dead because you can live without your arm.
I feel like there's a hospital somewhere then that has a record of his arm being removed and him seeking medical treatment. Because I don't think that you can have your arm hacked off and then just carry on with your business.
Dude, the defense would be all like, maybe he tied a tourniquet. Maybe his wife chopped his arm off to, like, it's another scheme since they were all about doing schemes and making money on the sly. Maybe she tied the tourniquet and somebody else chopped it off. And it's just like
that seems like real commitment to your schemes.
I was sitting there going, and here we thought the 70s were wild. The 30s are the concentrated version.
For Australia, yeah.
Yeah.
70s in the US, the 30s in Australia.
But so they would bring in testimony from medical experts that they would agree that the arm was not chewed off, but it was indeed cut. There were also theories that the arm never even went into the ocean and was actually fed to the shark while it was in the tank at the aquarium, since it wasn't digested like it should have been after a week.
Called it.
So then they would bring in the fish experts who would testify that so the arm could have upset the digestion of the shark, and that's why it wasn't breaking down. And then you add the stress and upset the shark was already in. It keeled over, so it clearly wasn't doing things the way it should have been anyway. Now, 14 witnesses would be brought in to testify that they did in fact see that the shark barfed up the arm, And then you had people who said, well, it also barfed up a small shark. If you remember, it also ate a baby shark. So they're like, maybe the baby shark ate the arm and then the bigger shark ate the baby shark. And that's why it wasn't being digested, because it was inside of a dead shark.
What?
And I was like, the fucking odds of a little shark ate an arm.
What are those called? The Russian stacking dolls? You got to get to the center.
But I was sitting there going, this is some weird ass shit.
Just a little.
But regardless, nobody really will know how exactly the arm came to be inside of the shark or where the rest of Jimmy is. The Navy and the Air Force would do their very best to discover the rest of Jimmy, but his body is never found, which makes it also super hard to say how he died. Of how many people were involved? You don't know. Where was he murdered? You don't know. We can guess it was most likely in the cottage, since the mattress is also never found. But it's just like, how do you test, or how do you prosecute somebody for this crime without anything, even to prove Patrick did it?
Yeah.
Then they'll bring in a cab driver who would admit to picking Patrick up from the cottage and driving him to Reggie's house, and Patrick was super disheveled, acting weird, and seemed to be concealing something in his coat.
Wait. Does the cab driver know him personally? Because if not, how does he know if he's acting weird or not? He could just be a weird feller.
He could be. So there is also that argument. But he claims that it looked like he was hiding something under his coat, which maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But he happened to drop him off at Reggie's house. And then if you remember Reggie's version of Patrick showing up at his house with Jimmy's arm, it kind of seems more probable of if that's a thing. But that's all he knows, and he just knows he dropped him off at Reggie's house. But after all's said and done and all the theories are thrown out there, the jury finds it real extra hard to believe that this feller was murdered and Patrick did it, so they find him innocent of Jimmy's murder, and he'd go free. Now, there's a lot of interesting theories out there. One that includes Reggie hiring a hitman to kill himself so that his wife wouldn't have to endure the public knowledge of all the criminal acts he's doing, and basically their family, all the things that come with that.
No. Next, what's the next theory?
In 1952, Reggie's wife who apparently knew everything that happened to Jimmy, decide she's going to come forward and officially tell what happened. But then she'd mysteriously die in a fire.
Oh, shit.
Now, also, weird tidbit, Patrick wouldn't die until 1965, so I find it interesting that when Reggie's wife is about to come forward and say she knows who did it, or knows anything about how Jimmy came to be dead, interesting, and then the fact that everybody who wants to come forward keels over.
Dun, dun, dun.
Mm-hmm. But that was my weird-ass shark case. And I do feel like, because the three people who were making money by being dishonest, they couldn't trust each other, and then the fact that there were any sort of blackmailing involved, I do kind of believe that Jimmy, I don't know really what caused the argument over the check writing thing, but I do believe that him going to the police and just being like, sort of give him a tidbit, but not give him a whole lot, just to test the waters, and be like, well, I agreed to work with the police, and then him being like, he doesn't get any of that insurance money, so he just took a loss getting rid of his boat. You know?
Yeah, makes sense.
That's enough of a threat, and then having somebody come back with, well, if you don't keep paying me money, then I'm going to keep feeding them things, and then you're going to be arrested, and then I can take over all of your shit. So I can see where you'd want to kill somebody. So the theory with that one was that Jimmy was blackmailing Reggie, and Reggie hired Patrick to kill him. So then when they went on their little boating thing, that's when Patrick killed Jimmy and then brought the arm and decided, you know what, fuck this shit, I'll blackmail Reggie myself. Which seems real weird if that's the thing. The only part my brain stopped at was, if you already know this feller is going to hire somebody to kill this other feller who is blackmailing him, it doesn't seem like probably the best idea to be like, you know what, I'll do the same thing. I kind of do believe that the arm was thrown into the tank as well, because every time, like, I was reading it and they were talking about the experts saying that it could have upset the shark's digestion. Yeah, but we're talking about a week.
Although the theory of it being in the little shark is interesting.
Yeah, but the odds of that, the fact that if this shark was never lured in, like if they would have just let him back out, he would just remain a missing person and they wouldn't have anything. But it's just crazy that if we're talking a bigger shark ate a little shark that happened to get hooked, which also seemed weird to me. So if that little shark had eaten an arm and then also got snagged on a hook, and then the bigger shark ate the little shark, I feel like if a little shark has an entire arm in his in himself, he's not real hungry.
Is it a boy?
Like, unless he's going, I got a real bad tummy ache. This looks like it could be a remedy.
I mean, that's what Jason does. He's got an upset stomach, so he eats cheese.
Maybe.
That's his cure-all for everything, is like a block of cheese.
The odds just seem super high or low, whatever. That's super not possible of it to eat an arm, then get eaten, and then get pulled up.
Well, on the other side of things is you said that when they originally caught the smaller shark, and then he left his line, and then it was acting all weird, so he pulled it in, and the tiger shark was attached to it or tangled in it, but there was very little left of the smaller shark. It doesn't sound like he ate the small shark in one bite.
Yeah.
So if he ripped the smaller shark apart at all, you would think if there was a whole man arm in this in this little shark, that it would have.
I didn't say the theories were great, but I do think that it made sense of like the insurance side of things, and that the fact that he was becoming a police informant, or even listed as a police informant, was enough to be like, I feel like if your police informant is dead, you should probably look into who he was snitching on.
I feel like that would be, it was all suicide.
Ugh. Every time I did the whole, why are we assuming suicide? But then maybe that's why like more modern police and investigative practices are, you don't assume anything is anything.
Yeah.
It made sense afterwards of the suicide thing, because when I read that there was rope around the arm, they're like, they assumed suicide, and I was like, what? And then when I read further, it was like, it was actually a thing that people would throw themselves off the bridge. And then part of me did the whole, was it? Or was that just a way they got rid of people because the police kept saying it was a suicide?
Well, and then why would the other feller say that the guy showed up at his house with the arm? You're saying that whole story would have been fabricated at that point?
Yeah, well,
because if he committed suicide, then it's all by accident. And
no. Like, so that was before they found out who Jimmy was. They were assuming when the arm was tied that somebody threw themselves off the bridge. But then when they found out Jimmy wasn't somebody who would have committed suicide, that's why they were like, so this probably isn't a suicide. But I'm saying for all the other people that they had fished out that were tied to weights, or like all of those people, how do we know that they were actually suicides? Like, I'd like to know what that would look like if they didn't tie a weight to themselves, or if somebody else tied a weight to them and chunked them over the bridge. It seems like they'd end the same way.
Yeah.
And how many cases did not go getting looked into because they're just assuming everybody's chunking themselves off the bridge and shooting themselves 3 times in the chest.
It's not funny.
Well, and then when I saw that in the trial, one of the theories was that his wife did a tourniquet and she helped chop it off. Like, that's why
That's a pretty big reach right there.
I get the scams of blowing up your boat for some sort of insurance thing, but I wouldn't chop my arm off for any amount of money.
No.
Like,
I don't think anybody would. Although, I don't know.
I feel like if Dave came over to me with a knife and he's just like, here, cut here, I'd be like, what is wrong with you? I would be like, all right, above or below the joint? Like, no.
Right at it. It cuts through easier.
I don't know what. We've got food in the fridge.
Ew. So, this is a public service announcement to all insurance companies associated with Claire and Dave. She would not cut off a limb for any amount of money, and she may blow up a boat, but she draws the line at dismemberment of herself or Dave. She also draws the line at cannibalism, apparently. All good things to know.
And also, I don't have a boat, so there's no worry about the boat being blown up. Not that I had. Well, that's not true, I did. But it didn't blow up.
Sure. Something to look into.
That's all I got.
Oh, thanks for that. And see, this is why if you just stay out of the ocean, you don't have to worry about whether or not they'll think you committed suicide by weight.
I'm not sure that would be necessarily the thing to take away from this case. Maybe don't dive into the seedy underworld of fraudulent check writing, and maybe if you're going to be a thieving son of a bitch, that perhaps don't be surprised that you can't trust your other cohorts.
Fine.
I thought it was also, I mean, I don't know at what point they did offer like police witness protection kind of level thing, and maybe they didn't think he was under any sort of threat because if Jimmy's dead and Patrick is in jail, that you would think your witness would be safe.
No, because I thought the 30s was like the time of
Mobsters?
Yeah. So I feel
Clearly.
like they all have connections in some way, shape, or form if they're into this kind of garbage.
Well, I do feel like there was some sort of,
Not to shame the police, but sounds like they were on the cut too. It's all suicide.
I think it's on the take.
Whatever. Did you know what I
I don't
meant?
know what on the cut means.
Did you know what I meant?
I did, but I was like,
Then don't be a dick about it.
but I do feel like there is a certain level of mobster kind of things happening, because the fact that Reggie's wife was going to finally tell the story, or at least what she knows of it, and then ends up mysteriously dead in a fire. Well, shoot, then you don't have really a body to take a peek at there either.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Oh, but apparently after Patrick was found innocent, the papers did the whole, now, you didn't do it, but don't do it again.
What?
I was like,
basically, you got away with it.
Right.
Count your blessings and don't pull shenanigans like that again.
I did think that part was not funny, but like it's real shitty. I don't see how they couldn't find the trunk other than
it's at the bottom of the ocean.
Fine.
I'm surprised the crocodile infested waters aren't used more for disposal of things.
How do you know they're not?
Touche. Makes me think of the one case that I did where the guy thought he strangled the girl and chucked her into the crocodile infested waters, and she still managed to survive.
So from those like gator hunting shows that I've watched, then when they use like the rotted chicken, I don't know that crocodile, I feel like they're like the vultures of the water. Like that's something really disgusting to eat. If you've ever smelled like really rotted chicken, that's what they'll hang on the lines and they'll eat overnight. So it makes me think that, like, you know how maggots really like the really gross stuff rather than, I mean, they'll still eat fresh skin, but like they really like the stuff that's already juicy and break you down and real stinky first.
Kind of like the stuff my dog likes to roll in.
I feel like she didn't have the best of smells. Although you'd also think that blood would attract.
Well, he raped her and strangled her, so there was no blood. But
she had her arms chopped off.
No, that was a different case. That was the 15-year-old Mary Vincent. She had her arms chopped off right around the elbow joint.
Well, shoot.
And then chucked over the side. And that was in California.
I don't remember.
My experience with crocodiles is the Rescuers Down Under when...
I don't know that we could call that experience. You can't watch a cartoon.
And he's dangling the little boy and the crocodiles are like jumping up at him.
Right. Again, I don't know that we could call that your crocodile experience.
Or Lake Placid.
I realize I too referenced a TV show, but mine was not a cartoon. Because then if you run that down, the crocodiles were like cat personalities and were going after mice.
No, that's in the Rescuers. The first one. Right. I'm talking about the Rescuers Down Under.
Andrea, either way. You know what? That is weird in the first Rescuer that they gave more personality to the gators.
Well, they made the gators more like cats, like you said, and they made the crocodiles real vicious-like, snapping at the little boy. And I don't know, because I've never researched it, and I don't know anything about crocodiles. Well, I guess you've got Animal Planet where they're in like the still waters in Africa or whatever.
I feel like you'd have to throw them in there naked. Well, because like clothes and stuff will wash up. So if you get rid of, not to help people plan a murder, but I feel like
you were saying to entice the crocodiles, they need to be naked. I was like, what?
No, yeah. You're like, these titties. Oh, Andrea. I'm sitting there thinking that like you probably would leave evidence on the shore of somebody's belongings. Moron.
All right.
No, but I do feel like there probably are people who have been disposed of in crocodile waters or alligator infested areas, because just like you have those weirdos that'll feed bodies to hogs, so you'll still, if you know where to look, you'll find pieces that were not completely digested.
Yeah.
But I bet there's an attempt out there somewhere.
I'm on the hunt now. I'll add it to the
Ew.
list of things.
For a place to dump a body?
No, for cases to look into, thank you.
Well, that's all I got.
You said that 3 times now.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.